There are multiple ways of guarding against nulls. The nullable reference types provide a way to get a warning when the compiler determines that the instance may be null. This is a good opportunity to guard against a null reference. Throughout this course, we've used the null conditional operator to indicate that we don't want to call a method or access a property if the object is not set to an instance. For example, the null conditional operator is used in the event handler that receives the order. Since the order is marked as a nullable reference type, the compiler will tell us that this is a good idea to check if it's null before accessing its members. In this case, accessing the order number, which is a GUID, using the null conditional operator means that the result will be a nullable GUID. If we introduce a non-nullable string and assign this to the order number .toString, you can see that since the GUID is a nullable GUID, we'll get a compiler warning. By now, you know that you can use the null conditional operator to access toString, only when that is set to an instance. However, since we explicitly declared that we want a string that is non-nullable, this isn't desirable, as these will be a mismatch. We really do not want to end up with question marks all over the codebase. Instead, let's go to the root of the problem. Let's get rid of the nullable types and indicate that all of this is non-nullable. This gets us back to the issue where it tells us that the order may be null. What our intent is with this code is to only run this entire block if the order isn't null. We can wrap this block in an if statement that asks if the order is not null before entering. We've successfully guarded against null, and the compiler will know that the order is set to an instance. Thus, we no longer need the null conditional operator. This makes the code much more understandable, and we found a potential null reference exception, which we've handled accordingly. We performed the null check using pattern matching. We can introduce a property pattern. This will, as you know, first validate that we have an instance, then look at the property. Again, the compiler knows that we've checked if the object is set to an instance. To prove that the compiler is pretty smart, if we use the var pattern, which simply captures this into a local variable, the warning appears again. This is because it does not validate that we have an instance. On the other hand, if we use the type pattern, it does know that we've checked if it's set to an instance. This also works if we invert the if statement and return if the object is not set to an instance. There are other ways to handle potential null references in C#, and act accordingly if you determine that an object is null.